Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Maria Korsnick. Let's see, I've got a, she is the president and CEO of the Nuclear Energy Institute. She is a seasoned energy executive with deep experience in policy, regulation, and nuclear energy advocacy. Today, she's going to talk about the status and outlook for nuclear energy. So let's all give Maria a hand.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for the kind introduction. Really happy to be with you here today. I've been in the industry over 40 years, and it has never been a time like it is right now in the nuclear industry. And I hope to be able to convey that to you in my remarks. I will make some remarks and then happy to take any questions that you might have or things that just might be on your mind. I don't know if all of you are familiar with the Nuclear Energy Institute, which is what I am president and CEO of. We are a member-driven organization for policy and technical issues for the industry. We have about 100 people in our organization, and we're really dedicated to the entire range for nuclear of the commercial nuclear industry. So we represent more than 360 different companies, and it's from mining and enrichment, fuel supply on the front end, to folks that operate and run nuclear plants, people that are inventing the new nuclear plants. So we have a lot of the new folks coming into the market. We have engineering services firms, legal firms, as well as decommissioning firms. So literally from the beginning all the way until the end. So it puts us in a pretty interesting position to see the entire industry. And we also do work internationally. So we see things here in the United States, and we also see things around the globe. And I'll address some of those in my remarks today. We've gathered here really at such an unprecedented moment, literally for every facet of the nuclear industry. Across our sector, growth has gone from incremental to really incredible. Just a year ago, right here in Utah, Governor Cox launched Operation Gigawatt to double the state's energy production over the next decade. And why is that? Well, because today, American manufacturing, advancing innovation, artificial intelligence, all are demanding more power. In fact, experts have increased the national 5-year load growth forecast by nearly 500%. 500% in just the next 5 years. What does that tell you? It not only tells you that we can't forecast, it tells you that you're at an inflection point, right? When something is changing sort of that much, that quickly, it really tells you that you're at a pretty significant inflection point. Over the next 10 years, experts also say that half of the country is at an increased risk of power outages. So we really have to take a hard look at how we're going to reach this increased demand that we're seeing. And so we can build a future of really unlimited potential if we take a hard look and accelerate some of the deployment of the nuclear energy concepts and plants that are being considered right now. But everyone in this room knows that to accelerate nuclear deployment, we also have to expand the nuclear fuel supply. Just a little bit of a snapshot. In 1980, the United States produced more than 43 million pounds of uranium. 43 million pounds. By 2022, that number had fallen to below 100,000 pounds, a decrease of more than 99%. Today, our domestic uranium production is starting to rebound. In 2024, it reached nearly 700,000 pounds, a 7-fold increase in just 2 years, but it's still far from what we need it to be. And we can only meet our goals if we shore up both our domestic supply chain and our worldwide allied market. But it's progress. This renewed momentum on domestic fuel production reflects renewed momentum really for nuclear more broadly. People have recognized that our national and global energy future, in fact, must include nuclear power. Driving that conversation today is the need for data centers, advanced computing, and artificial intelligence, because whoever leads in AI, well, they're going to lead the world. And the rate of AI innovation can't be constrained by the rate of energy output. So we got to get going. The only way to future proof our grid, the only form of energy that's clean and reliable, is nuclear. So it's a pretty smart strategic answer. And in Washington, D.C., our industry enjoys strong continued support. On just his third day in office, Secretary of Energy Chris Wright signed an order to, and I quote, unleash commercial nuclear power. He is vice chair of the Energy Dominance Council that's chaired by the Secretary of the Interior, Doug Burgum. And they've been prioritizing uranium mining projects, working to cut review timelines down to just weeks. In fact, the first projects to receive that accelerated review was a mine right here in Utah. In May, I was fortunate enough to visit the White House to watch President Trump sign 4 executive orders in support of the nuclear industry. And their impact can really be summarized in broadly 4 work streams. The first is deploying advanced nuclear reactor technologies for national security. And that involves everything from building nuclear at military installations to promoting the export of nuclear abroad. The second work stream is in reinvigorating the nuclear industrial base. The administration is really funding plant restarts and construction, expanding the nuclear workforce, and crucially, strengthening the domestic fuel supply. And that last action includes releasing at least 20 metric tons of high assay LEU, also called HALEU, from federal stockpiles, as well as committing to build a long-term domestic uranium fuel supply. The Department of Energy has also established a fuel line pilot program, which will help produce the fuel that's needed to bring 3 next generation reactors online. That third work stream is reforming nuclear reactor testing, and that's happening at the Department of Energy. And that includes changes to the national lab process for reactor testing, as well as streamlining the environmental reviews. And the fourth work stream is ordering the reform of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, or NRC. That's who oversees the commercial nuclear industry. And NEI has actually been working with the NRC for many years to improve its efficiency. And we really welcome this attention that the administration is bringing. Right now, the NRC is going through a period of modernization to allow them to maintain global leadership. And we're really seeing some pretty significant process. One of the things that we do in the current fleet, we have a license to operate for a certain period of time, and then we renew that license or extend that license. So those license renewals have now been reduced by 50%, and broader NRC review efforts that we see, they have to review other things that happen at current power plants. We see those review times have been reduced by as much as 60%. Now we're seeing some of those same trends being applied to new license applications. So that's what you're seeing in some of these new inventions, new innovations that are going through the licensing process. We're seeing a really positive, more efficient process. So the goal for greater efficiency at the regulator are very clear. We want to keep nuclear energy safe. We're all about safety. We want to just cut the red tape, and we want to slash needless cost. Just a few weeks after the president announced the executive orders that we talked about, he also signed a budget bill into law, which preserved much of the nuclear tax credits that our industry needs to meet the goals outlined by those 4 executive orders that I just spoke of. So that was a huge win for the industry. And that's on top of a $2.72 billion bill that passed last year that supports specifically the domestic fuel supply and also included a ban on Russian uranium fuel imports, which we were strong supporters of. So the bottom line is this administration has recognized the importance of uranium and the value of nuclear as a secure, resilient, affordable, and abundant energy source. This federal support is reflected by support in all of the states really across the country. This year alone, in state legislatures, They have considered more than 350 bills in support of nuclear power. 350 bills. So if we were having this conversation 6 or 7 years ago, if I told you there were 10 bills that had anything to do with nuclear power across all of those state legislatures, that would have been a big deal. So just to give you a flavor, when we're talking about 350 or more bills being considered, it's a brand new day. The National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners, it's also called NARUC, recently passed a resolution, and I quote, affirming nuclear energy's indispensable role in powering a clean, reliable, and resilient future. Right here in Utah, lawmakers have committed $10 million to jumpstart nuclear projects. In Kansas, officials just reached an agreement to explore bringing new nuclear to that state. In New York, the governor announced that the state would build its first nuclear power plant in nearly 4 decades. I add, in New York, the state that just shut down a nuclear plant just a couple of years ago, I want to give you that flavor of how much of a sea change that this is, from even states that have recently made decisions to close things, beginning to reopen them, or they've shut down and they want to build new. In Colorado, a bill passed to recognize nuclear as clean energy. In Wyoming, the state government recently partnered with the EPA to approve the expansion of a nearby uranium mine. In Texas, which I'm actually headed to tomorrow, lawmakers approved $350 million for new nuclear projects, which includes establishing a nuclear office that reports directly to the governor and supporting workforce development and uranium mining. For that last initiative, the state has also approved the expansion of a uranium production facility owned by NCOR, which is seeking to triple its production in just the next 3 years. And it's not just at the state level. The mayors are lining up right behind them. In June, the U.S. Conference of Mayors unanimously approved a resolution supporting nuclear tax credits and endorsing nuclear's economic benefits. This action has been matched by a decisive swing in public sentiment. Today, 61% of Americans now support nuclear energy, and that's the highest level in 15 years. And nuclear's resurgence, really, it's not just a domestic trend, it's a global phenomenon. In September, UK Prime Minister Starmer announced a nuclear partnership with the United States worth billions, declaring that this is a golden age of nuclear. And it's not just the UK that's ready to embrace that, right? As the deal was being finalized, I was leading a delegation of 65 executives from more than 30 companies, and we were over at the International Atomic Energy Agency's General Conference in Vienna, Austria. We met with over 20 countries that are looking to expand their nuclear programs, and not only in well-established markets like Canada and the United Kingdom, but also in emerging markets such as Singapore and Saudi Arabia. We were there alongside a senior U.S. team led by Secretary Wright, which really drove home that the U.S. is serious about doing business in commercial nuclear on the global stage. Such an exciting time to see how strong that the U.S. industry engagement was, combined with our government support. It's creating real opportunities for international partnerships. We just heard the UK announcement just a few weeks ago. I predict you will see more of those types of announcements of the US partnering with other countries on commercial nuclear. In the past year, I've also led trade missions to Sweden, to Finland, to the Netherlands, also to the United Kingdom. That last country has awarded Urenco almost $250 million to build a high-assay LEU facility over in the United Kingdom. Around the world, nuclear has really moved from the fringes of the conversation to the main stage. Countries that had once stepped away from nuclear are now very much ready to move forward. Just a couple of examples. 35 years ago, Italy closed its last nuclear plant. But in February of this year, that nation passed a law to begin transitioning back to nuclear. In Germany, a majority of people now support restarting their country's nuclear program. And in Japan, the latest national energy plan calls for sourcing 20% of its electricity needs from nuclear by 2040. What's important about that 20% number is they can't just restart plants that they have shut down and get to 20%. So to get to that 20% number, yes, they have to restart plants they've closed, but they've got to build something new. Countries that were already pro-nuclear are redoubling their efforts. Bulgaria, Romania, and India are all moving ahead with new nuclear plants. And I just visited Poland earlier this year, where Bechtel and Westinghouse are partnering to build the country's very first nuclear reactor. And GE Hitachi and Orlen Synthos Green Energy are also planning to construct a fleet of small nuclear reactors, modular reactors, also there in Poland. So it isn't just the public sector that's turning to nuclear. The private sector is as well. And that wasn't always the case. In fact, I recount a meeting I had just a few years ago when I found myself in a meeting with a very large company from Silicon Valley. We were talking about the need for clean energy, and they told me flat out, well, they would never go with nuclear power. Even though they understood its value as a clean and reliable energy source, even though they knew nuclear was well positioned to meet their sector's energy demands for decades to come, they said they just wouldn't do it. Now, fast forward to today, we're in a whole new reality. Google, Meta, and Amazon are all making moves on the global stage to support nuclear. They joined 14 of the world's largest banks and financial institutions to pledge to triple the global nuclear capacity by 2050. Amazon signed a multi-decade $20 billion agreement to buy nuclear power. Meta recently signed its own 20-year deal to secure access to nuclear power. And Google has signed an agreement to develop 3 project sites for next-gen reactors. All in, new nuclear partnerships with tech customers total more than 30 gigawatts across the US, and that number keeps growing. Beyond Silicon Valley, Wall Street is also betting big on nuclear and, by extension, uranium. Morgan Stanley projects that investments in nuclear, the whole nuclear value chain, could reach $2.2 trillion by 2050, a 46% jump from last year's forecast. And according to Bank of America, nuclear energy represents a $10 trillion market opportunity that could hold the answer to the world's power shortages. Corporations aren't running away from us. They're running towards us, and our arms are wide open. Our industry is responding to this unprecedented interest with unprecedented action. Urenco, Orano, Global Laser Enrichment, General Matter, and LIS Technologies are all making moves to reshore our fuel supply. Centrus just announced a multi-billion-dollar deal expansion of their uranium enrichment plant in Ohio. Ontario Power Generation began construction on their SMR project in Canada. They're building the GE Hitachi design. TerraPower has broken ground in Wyoming on its Natrium reactor. Kairos Power has started construction on their Hermes reactor in Tennessee. And Oklo held a groundbreaking ceremony just recently at Idaho National Lab for their Aurora powerhouse. And we can't forget that advanced reactors are already powering homes and businesses in the Southeast as we speak, to the completion of Southern's Project Vogel. And there's more to come. Every year, NEI surveys our utility members on their plans for the future. And they told us that before the end of the decade, so here in the 2020s, they expect to submit 28 power upgrade applications and 21 license and second license renewal applications. That'll take power plants from 60 years of operation to 80 years of operation. That's going to get us into the 2050s with the current fleet. And as for new nuclear, so far, nearly 23 gigawatts of new nuclear projects are expected by 2040. As I mentioned, plant restarts are also on the horizon. In Michigan, Holtec has received approval to restart the Palisades plant. I toured that recently. They're making very good progress. In Pennsylvania, Constellation has applied to restart the Crane Clean Energy Center. I've toured that as well. And in Iowa, NextEra is considering a restart of the Duane Arnold plant. And all that depends on a stable, secure, and resilient fuel supply. So the bottom line is there are tremendous opportunities ahead of us, but we can only harness these possibilities when we work together in partnership. And that includes partnerships between our industry and the local community. Like the agreement reached this year between Energy Fuels and the Navajo Nation, which created additional protections for transporting the uranium ore from the Pinyon Plain mine. It also includes partnerships across the public and private sector. It's true that there are things that only the industry can accomplish, like developing cutting edge fuel innovations and bringing those ideas to fruition. But there are also some things that only the government can do, like prioritizing uranium mining projects and speeding up the rate at which domestic mines can bring more production online, like doubling down on investing in our domestic and allied fuel capacity, especially as the US steps back from Russian fuel sources, and like continuing to treat uranium as a top priority and essential to energy as well as national security. A strong nuclear industry begins with a strong fuel supply. Imagine the abundance that we can unlock if we do unleash commercial nuclear power. Imagine the hundreds of thousands of jobs that we're going to create, the millions of homes and businesses that we will power, and the untold innovation that we will fuel. We can accomplish all of this. Together, we can make the impossible possible because nuclear makes it happen. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any of your questions. Yeah, right there.
When do you think we can have uranium again recognized as critical?
So the question is, when can uranium be recognized as a critical mineral? And there's a lot of sides to that story. Uranium used to be considered a critical mineral. It was removed from the critical mineral list when they removed all fuel from the critical mineral list. So there is no fuel currently as a critical mineral. And I want uranium for fuel. So we have to find a way that we get the attention that we want for uranium. And I think there's ways to get that attention without necessarily arguing as to whether or not it needs to be a critical mineral. Like if you think about why you would want it to be a critical mineral, well, because you want permitting to happen faster. Well, because you want it to be prioritized for attention. I think we can achieve those goals without necessarily going down the path that it has to be a critical mineral. So I wouldn't take the fact that it's not on the critical mineral list to feel like it's not getting attention. The Defense Production Act is something that the current administration is using. In fact, we're hosting the kickoff of the consortium that will be formed as part of this Defense Production Act process, and that's in our office. I don't think it's next week. I think it's the week after. Where we're bringing the Defense Production Act basically gives you the ability for different sectors of the economy to work together, where normally you would say, oh, wait a minute, that's not a free market economy. You got to be careful having all those conversations in one place. But the Defense Production Act gives you that cover, if you will, to let's get the utilities, let's get the miners, let's get everybody and say, how is it that we can jumpstart this industry? So I would tell you, I see evidence that the administration is prioritizing uranium. I can tell you from the host of actions that I just mentioned. And so I think we need to focus on what are the things that we want done to demonstrate that it is a priority. And I see those happening. But I'm open if there's additional things that you feel that we should be focused on. I know Jack's here, he works for me. I know he's very focused on that.
I wanted it for the EPA.
Yeah, so in the Defense Production Act is, I mean, that's happening, right? Good question. Others? Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if I can state this very well, but as far as I know, in some of the last major energy booms that this country has experienced, where the moves into those energy sources have happened really fast, there have been a lot of unexpected impacts, and the public has been left holding the bag on a lot of those things, like, hard rock mine reclamation. Trying to think what the other example was that I have in mind. Yeah, I mean, we still have all this legacy, high level uranium waste. We have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of abandoned oil and gas wells in this country, for which the public is picking up the costs of remediation because those companies have been sold and moved on. So having this groundswell of pro nuclear sentiment and easing of environmental regulations really bothers me. And I'm just wondering why those issues aren't being raised.
Sure, thanks. I feel from your question that you're concerned that I'd say moving quickly could lead to maybe unintended consequences or negative consequences. And so I can just reflect on my history. I've been in the nuclear industry since 1986. And I can just say that from a nuclear industry perspective, safety is not negotiable. And so I have not seen sort of any support for, I would say, any kind of cutting of corners in that way. I've also worked with our regulator for that amount of time. And I can tell you that there are easy ways to create much more efficient regulation that's not about cutting corners, that's not about doing it in any way that's less safe. And I'd say that's really what's being focused on here. Even in places where we're talking about building, when you mentioned environmental, the same environmental monitoring is being done. The core bore samples are being taken to make sure you understand where you're building. So I don't see anything that's, I would say, taking a step back at all on safety. But I do see an industry that's, I would just say, strangled with maybe needless regulation. And I think really the target here is sort of breaking free from that and making sure that we're bringing the good to the American people. And I think good, clean, reliable power is what the American people want. And so the reality is AI is going to happen. And we can either lead with AI or we can take a back seat. And I can tell you, China is going to lead if we don't. I think we have to take a step back and say, what kind of world do we want to live in about 20 years? And we need to own that, and we got to figure out how to power it. We can power it with what we have today, or we could power it with some of what we have today and some additional clean, reliable sources. And that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring nuclear in to partner with wind and solar where it makes sense, to partner with oil and gas in places that makes sense. But to bring nuclear in as part of the solution. And but it's going to be an all the above solution. It's not like it's only going to be nuclear and there's not going to be anything else. Nuclear has the round the clock, very reliable source. Wind and solar, beautiful, but they're not there all the time. And so they're always going to have something that backs them up. That can be a gas plant. It can be other things. We would say it would be nice if that was a nuclear plant, because then when the nuclear plant's running, you're also not emitting anything. You're not emitting any carbon dioxide. So, these are choices. And I think this is an important time, right, in this industry to take a hard look at how is it that we can bring this clean, reliable power to the American people. I love nuclear power because I have kids and I love my kids. And I want them to live in a future that has this clean, reliable power. And I feel that nuclear is definitely a firm solution. I hear you in terms of having concerns. I think the only way that we build that in is we allow those concerns to be heard throughout the process. And so speak, please, throughout the process and make sure that as these things are built and developed, that they're done safely. I have confidence that they will, but I see that from the inside. Any other comments or questions? This gentleman.
My name is Joe. I'm at the Greater Flagstaff Chamber of Commerce, so I'm right in the center of. I'm actually in between this facility and the Pinion Mine, and so in our community, the transportation issue is an often discussed issue. But I want to focus on something you said towards the end of your remarks about the new job potential from growing the this aspect of power in the country, and just ask you if you, as I think about Phoenix and the metro Phoenix area, one of the fastest growing areas in the last 2 decades, powered by Palo Verde from Arizona Public Service, would seem to me that there are literally millions of jobs in the Southwest that are already powered by nuclear. Does your entity track how nuclear touches employment in the country currently? And can you share some insight on that?
Yeah, we do. We check direct employment as well as indirect, meaning, whether you're a direct hire, maybe you're working through a contracted support to the nuclear industry. Jack, I'm going to lean on you because I haven't used the statistic in a while. But I think we direct or indirectly employ about 400,000. I think that's the right number. Don't quote me on that because I haven't used that in a while, but I think it's in the ballpark of that number. But the Department of Energy did a study, maybe it's 2 years ago now, but basically looking at the amount of nuclear energy that they feel that we need in the United States, and that at the time. So we have about 100 gigawatts today, right? There's 94 plants that operate in the United States today, but it totals about 100 gigawatts from clean nuclear energy today. And the goal was to try to get us to 300. So that is an additional 200 or twice as much as we have today additional. And the DOE did a study on that. It was called the Liftoff Report for Nuclear Power. And they looked at the workforce side of that. And they said, how much additional workforce? So in addition to what we have today. And they said we'd need 375,000 additional workers to get to that additional 200 gigawatts. But then President Trump took office, and instead of saying, oh, we're going to triple nuclear, he said, no, we're going to quadruple nuclear. So I offer, all of those goals are challenging and hard. I just offer that to double it was the number that was associated with 375,000 workers. Now, I'm a nuclear engineer, and so a lot of times when people say, oh, for nuclear power, we're going to need a lot of nuclear engineers. And we need some, but it's not really the nuclear engineers that we're going to need as much. It's power plant people, right? So you need the mechanics and the electricians and mechanical engineers and electrical engineers. And what I often like to say for nuclear is we boil water different. Our heat source is different. And after we turn that water into steam, it's a power plant, just like other power plants. You could go to a gas plant, you could go to a coal plant. So you need all those kinds of folks that keep those plants running really well as well. And you need craftsmen and just as much as you need engineers. And so what I share when we're saying 375,000, that's all of that, right? That it's not just the engineers, it's all in. But again, it's a pretty significant lift from where we are today. And how do I think that can happen? I mean, a couple of ways. I work with the union presidents quite a bit in the job that I have, so I connect with them on how their apprenticeship programs are going. All of their apprenticeship programs are at an all-time high. And one of the things that's driving that is the data center growth. So if you think about building a data center, what do you need? Well, I need welders, I need electricians, I need plumbers and pipe fitters. Well, so it's a lot of the same craft, right? So as you're building these data centers, we're also sending a signal, right, to that workforce that says, hey, get ready, right? Because you're building data centers now. Let's say it takes you 9 months to build a data center, maybe, or maybe a year. But if you then announce a large project like a nuclear plant, you attract those workers. First of all, we pay a little bit better. And second of all, that job's going to last a little longer. And some of these workers like to be in one place for a little bit of a longer time. So there's a bit of synergistic effect right now. The data centers that are being built, sending that signal, the ranks of the craftsmen are really increasing right now. And they'll be available. Now it's not going to be perfect, right? This is going to be lumpy. I'm just saying that it's sort of already begun to kind of get that signal. If you look at universities, we have about 100 universities that are members of our organization. So we kind of have a good flow of communication with them. Absolutely, the ranks of the engineering programs, and specifically in this case, nuclear engineering, are increasing. So that signal is being sent. The more that people are talking from a policy level, the President of the United States, the administration, they're talking about the fact that nuclear is good. It's good for this country. We want this country to help our allies and help them build commercial nuclear plants. It puts it on the attention, right? And so it is happening now. You are seeing more people that are being attracted into the industry. So again, it's a fabulous time full of innovation. I would just put in a plug for our national labs. Our national labs are gems for this country. And some of the things that you're seeing now for nuclear, our national labs have been working on this stuff for over a decade. The high assay LAU, the TRISO fuel, these are things our national labs have been working on probably more than a decade, probably 20 years. And so the innovation pipeline for nuclear, it's chock-a-block full. And it's those innovations that are coming to the marketplace. So the nuclear of yesterday, all large gigawatt-sized plants. The nuclear of tomorrow, sure, you're going to have some large plants. You're going to have some small ones, some medium ones. It's that kind of innovation that's really bringing nuclear to the fore, because where nuclear couldn't be a solution before, let's say you're in the middle of Alaska, or you're in the middle of, of a very remote location. You can't plunk down, a gigawatt-sized plant in the middle of that. They can't handle it there. You don't need that much power. But you could put a microreactor there, right? You could put 10 megawatts or 15, or maybe 50. That's why our Department of Defense is very interested in this. They want to help our troops. This power source can be very helpful to our troops, and they can make mobile versions of this. Well, they're very interested in that. And we as an industry are going to benefit from some of the innovations that our Department of Defense will be using. So again, I hope I answered your question a little bit. Didn't mean to drag on. Are there any other comments or questions? I'm happy to answer anything. You got to keep me honest on time. I don't know how much time you want me up here. So, well, anyway, I'll just end. Incredibly exciting time for nuclear. And I just want to appreciate all that you do, and especially they do right here at Energy Fuels for helping us on the front end of the fuel supply. Fabulous work. Thank you very much.